And we are live. So, hello everybody. Welcome to this session, this masterclass session. We're introducing Pierre Montersino, a strategic transformation expert, program leader, and CIO with expertise in ERP, cloud solutions, change management, and AI, driving business and IT excellence with a passion for delivering impactful results. And today we are going to be talking about the transformative impact of artificial intelligence. Welcome, Pierre.
Hi, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this great session. I'm looking forward to presenting what I know on AI. Before we go any further, I assume you can see my screen. My screen's open and available. Everybody can see that. Great. Perfect.
There we go.
Just a heads up for you. This is very text intensive slide presentation. I don't expect you to read word for word, but I do suggest that you read the highlighted text, and I've put it in blue and I've put it in bold so you can actually see it. I would encourage also questions where you can. If I'm talking a lot and you want to put it into the chat bot, I'm hoping that Robin, I'm hoping you're online, will be able to answer those questions for you. If not, I'll be able to type it up. I would also encourage you to link with me on LinkedIn so that you can, if you have any further queries. I would also appreciate it if you could put your feedback on it, good or bad, on what you thought of the slide deck and what you think about what I am presenting about. Look forward to hearing from you all. So without further ado, I'm going to start kicking off. Okay. So here we go. This is a mural done by Chef Gul. He's based in London at the moment, and he actually put this together and he mapped out everything that is inside my presentation. There's a few other bits and pieces, but everything about AI and Gen AI that you need to know, it's in this slide deck or this mural that he has going. So everything in here will be virtually covering off in one form or another, plus a few other little bits and pieces. Right, so again, this is the handsome devil that I am. There's a little bit of a brief background about me. I'm not going to dwell on this, but, again, please just note that, this is all taken from the internet, all taken from Gen AI. It's been validated. It's been checked twice so that there are no mistakes. But again, if you find anything, I'd appreciate some feedback. So let's get straight into this. What is AI and Gen AI? Let's start a little bit of a history lesson, right? Start off back in the 1950s, and we start talking in the corner here. We've got machine learning, where it was actually coined, and you have the Turing test. And then we've actually had this building through, coming up to where it's actually come to a very exciting stage where we have deep learning and embedded and persuasive AI and generative AI all coming in and kicking off in the 2010s and 2020s. And what's going to go on beyond is even more exciting, in my personal opinion. So let's just kick off with some stats. There's no presentation without some stats. We've got to have some stats. So first things first. In 2024, this is what money is being spent. And this is for any organization that has over a £1.5 million investment is being highlighted here. So anything under 1.5 million is not actually being recorded here. So you can see, for example, in the UK, where I live in London, we have 630 investments of 21 billion. And all investors are Google, AWS, HP, and Beyond Limits as well. So you can see where there's a lot of money being spent to this. And they reckon it's going to cost anything up to about $250 billion are going to be spent in AI alone. So AI is a shiny tool. It's the most exciting, most talked about tool ever. But it is a tool. Remember that. It is key to that. And that's the important thing. So 60,000 people or 60,000 organizations currently operate around the world at the moment. That's a phenomenal amount of people, right? And you can see here where primarily it's being spent at the moment. On the right-hand side, and Christian, I'm going to ask you to remember this number, 24 billion, right? Because we're going to come back to the whole of the presentation is linked to certain parts. But also, if you look at here, what's very interesting is the male-female stroke usage of it, where there's a lot more men using it than women, and I would just love to hear anybody's views as to why that is. I personally think it's down to there's more men than women in the roles at the moment, but equally men are a lot more adventurous than women to do it. But do keep this number in mind. So just a few more stats just to really get this going. Like we said, 407 billion in 2022, right? China in the next few years will be the world leader. They are steaming ahead faster than anybody else. Public market investors have rushed to the so-called Magnificent Seven technologies that we have, right? Does anybody know what those Magnificent Seven technologies are? I think, Christian, I gave you a little bit of a heads up before. I can only see you, so I don't know how many people are actually on the call. But I'll explain it to you anyway. So I'll show you. It's Alphabet, it's the Amazon, the Apples, Metas, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and obviously Tesla. You've actually seen the emails, or you've heard that these are the people that are saying, let's slow this down because it's really moving rapidly too fast. So, is it a hype? Is the challenges that we have so much talk? Let's just show you a couple of charts from before. So these are the Gartner reports. Gartner produces these reports for every bit of software that is launched, and it actually shows you where there's a hype. So this one was actually done in 2022. It's a 5 to 10 year projection, and you can actually see there wasn't much work here or stuff done on Gen AI and what is going on. If you shoot across to the next year, 2023, we've had to reduce it to 2.5 years. You can see how quickly, within a year, how fast it's actually grown to actually be right at the top here now. And it's a peak of an inflated expectation. So personally, in my views, and you'll see a couple of other views a little bit later, I think that the time for the hype has gone. And I think it's the time to actually start doing some stuff. But this is an interesting one, right? This is from the Financial Times. It was an article which was talked about AI on the 19th of June, so just a week ago, right? And it talks about the hype, is it gone? And it looks about, the hype around artificial intelligence. Investors are increasingly trying to separate the wheat from the chaff. The stock market has been driven by speculative hype at the moment, and they're now looking past this. And the really nice thing at the end here was us just saying AI 15 times is not going to get you the magic wand, so we'll see where it goes. And this is a very interesting one I like at the moment, because this is from the executive, this is from the business. I want to actually give you now a senior leader's view of what AI is about, right? So the elephant in the room, okay? And this is her view that she actually had, I'm sure you all know what a Luddite is at the moment. And it really talks about, the carpet covering the elephant and so on and so forth. Okay, so the interesting topic or the interesting paragraph is the one at the end. It says the toxic environments, the lack of cohesion, leading to poor processes and poor data. I've come across quite a few companies who actually do fall into this trap as well. So this is very, very important and key. Okay, moving on. What is it? What is Gen AI and AI, or AI and Gen AI, which one to look at? This is a brand new slide. I guess you put it in. Thank you to Robin for this. Well, in my views, and there's a slight discrepancy here, but the key components of an AI, well, it's really machine learning. It talks about the algorithms that it talks about. Then you have deep learning, which is a subset of machine learning, but it also uses neural networks. You have NLPs, right? And again, this is enabling computers to understand, interpret, and generate human language. Amazing what it can do. And it can actually mimic you. I've seen a picture of somebody going on the stage, and you've actually seen that they've turned it into a clown animation in real life, and you can actually sing him on stage. It's truly amazing what they've done, right? And then, of course, you've got CV. You will notice that there are lots and lots of acronyms in AI. These are just some of them. And on the AI universe, which is the picture on the right-hand side, it actually tells you where each of these are and where they sit in the section. So you can see decision trees and machine learning, for example. You can see things like capsule networks in deep learning, and so on and so forth. So it's a great picture, actually. I think it just tells 1,000 words. So, and again, talking about this, AI itself is categorized into three versions: narrow, general, and super. If we start at the bottom one, super is Skynet. We've all seen Terminator. Uh, we know that it is coming up. It is something that's in the future, and it's something that we could be worried about. Personally, I think that's here already, but it is. GI or AGI, as it's called here, again, that's what we tend to see happening now, where we see a lot of stuff that's just been generated, reports which are done, analyzed, and put back to the humans is her working. Where it's narrow is things like, for example, the chess games. So if you looked at that timeline I gave you, we had Kaspersky, who was a chess player. He was beaten in 1997 by a computer. That was where ANI comes into it. So you can see the distinguishes between the three areas, right? ASI, as I said, super intelligence is in the future. So, big question. Is there a difference? Or what do you think the difference is between AI and Gen AI? Let's start with the first one. And the first one covers it all. AI, it focuses, and it's a very, very high level approach. I'd love to sit and spend 3.5 hours talking about this, but I think Christian would die of boredom here. Right? So AI is focusing on creating systems that require human intelligence, so stuff we've done before, right? And it learns, but it plays it back. It does some problem solving. It helps us do it. So in the medical field, for excuse me, for example, it's very key. Excuse me, I'm going to have a sip of tea. For example, chess games, poker games, those all come from AI. Generative AI is a subset of it, so it is part of AI, but it actually has algorithms that communicate, generate new content. So it picks up on the content it has, and it turns it around and creates new content out of existing content that's there. And this is where it's a problem. We'll come on to a little bit later. But it learns from what is picked up. And that's why you have huge amounts of data doing it. If you look at the bottom left-hand screen, AI itself just encompasses a large range of technologies and applications. It reads PDFs, it can read Word documents, it can read photographs, it can read GIFs, so on and so forth. But Gen AI, it's extended the creative capability. So it actually takes it beyond what it's actually learned, and it builds on it, and it shows you what it thinks is the right answer, right? It can write articles for you. It can create art. It can compose music, really, and it can synthesize realistic images. Right? It relies on advanced neural network architectures and things like GANs, which is graphics, and produces new and original content that mimics the training data. So it's just a copy, but also generates. This is why it's so powerful. So, how do you communicate with these? Well, we call it LLMs. Everybody I've talked to knows what an LLM, right? But what does an LLM do? Well, it communicates clearly with the data. And for example, if I take the snapshot, with ChatGPT 3, it used 175 billion parameters, 175 separate queries to actually help build the system. And that's just ChatGPT 3. What happens with ChatGPT 4? It's double that. It's even 3 times the size of this. So it's hours and hours and hours of coding which has gone into this. By the way, coding of LLMs is normally done in Python and C, C hash, I think it is. And I've actually seen 1 or 2 bits and pieces done in C++ for some of the older links into the APIs and so on and so forth. So how do we communicate? Well, you can see the picture on the right-hand side, but really the advantage is you can see clearly it's efficient, increases productivity, it's scalable, you can add in the customization, wide range of use cases, and is also very good for the prototyping. The disadvantages, clearly, environmental impact, the bias, representation, and you'll hear more about that a little bit later. The picture on the right-hand side here, what that talks about is these are the elements that you need to factor in. And these are the elements of what an LLM can do before it actually gives you an answer. So everything on the right-hand side, it evaluates, it costs, it aligns, right? It checks its inference, it looks at its parallelism, it looks at it, and then everything else about the training, and then the applications that go underneath it as well. But AI doesn't always get it right? And again, this is I love this little picture. This actually shows Madame Teresa, what I thought Madame Teresa did when it was trying to fight poverty. Okay. you can see in time and time again, right? What they always say to you here is, we need the humans to validate Gen AI. At the moment, it is very accurate. It can be accurate, and it depends on what the quality of the data you have, but it does need some form of human element to be involved in this to make it right. Okay. Some project failures. I mean, some of the big boys haven't got it right. This is Amazon's tool. The very first one which they developed showed some bias. What they did was they got some CVs, and they got a lot of CVs from men and didn't get very, very few CVs from women. And so you automatically got a bias towards men rather than women. And they tried to fix the problem, but it didn't work. And I think they've actually pulled this product. So then they tried to create a new one as well. Microsoft as well, they had so. But what was very interesting here is that the people trained it to do talk offensively, and it had bad behaviors. So, and again, they had to pull that one and terminate it. Over the page is yet another few examples. The ethics controversy again, and again with Google, what they did, it's still running, but it's not running well, is the ethical implications of this tool they had. And then there have been various other tools as well. For example, Facebook had a challenge with this where the facial recognition didn't come through. They had privacy violations because there was no authorization for them to use the people's photographs. They also had challenges where they were then competing and looking at beauty against other areas as well. So these are some of the failures we've had going forward there. Okay. So where are we now? The key thing here is around AI and transformation. What would the whole presentation is about? So what are the pros and the cons of this? Well, we do know that the pros, it's efficient. We know that it can handle data quite well. It can turn the data around. It can analyze it very well, far quicker than what we can at the moment. When I say we, human beings, it can handle large user experiences and enhance user experiences. It can help innovate, and it can deliver new capabilities. By looking at doing a lot of the arduous or the repetitive tasks, shall we say, it actually does reduce some of the costs. So some of your reporting, for example, are good. It's used a lot. AI, for example, is used a lot in the pharmaceutical world, where they do a lot of data analysis, looking at some of the lab reports and turning this around. It's also very good at reducing human error, and you have no or zero risk that we have. But also it is available 24/7. And those are the pros and cons, or the pros. Sorry, the cons. There will be job displacement. It will happen, right? Ones that've been talked about, articles that are written in magazines, for example, those could be generated or created by Gen AI. It could look at an analysis and actually spit out really good books. And you'll see a cartoon at the end of this that talks about that as well. Where it does have a big challenge, and we've talked about it before, so some of the projects have failed, is around the ethical and privacy concerns, right? There are issues around the bias and the equality as well. But it's very heavily dependent on skills and people who actually know the system. And what will actually start happening is, when people start using the tools more and more, and it becomes more frequent, they'll start becoming complacent, and you'll start having, complacency, and people won't start checking the data or validating a lot of the data going forward. It's actually quite high, and it's quite a high cost to set it up in the beginning. Some people, in fact, most executives, when they initially start off, think it's going to be a low ball cost that I have, but what they then realize is very, very quickly there are additional costs that will come into this. And again, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but at a high level, you need to make sure that you have the right processes in place. You need to have the right data in place. You need to make sure that you have the ethical requirements. You need to have the learning that happens to this. You need to be able to program this. So it does cost a lot more, and it's very, very important that you build into a very sound business case, and that you continuously are looking at evolving and building on that business case, because things will change as more and more happens. We do talk about it, and I'll repeat it later. Is that I would always suggest that we start slowly but surely. Take a step at a time. Don't try and eat the elephant all in one hit, because it's just not going to work. Making sure that you have your data that's correct, like I said. Making sure you take out your. Remember that elephant in the room that we had, where we talked about the unbiasedness and the challenges and the poison chalice they have. So those are key areas as well. It's also quite challenging because you got to make sure that you don't have the security risks. You need to make sure that your highly sensitive data is ring fenced and it cannot be touched. There's an incident where somebody who recently installed Copilot, they had access to all the executives' data, so they had their salaries, their bonuses, their leave, how much time was taken off, and so you got to make sure that you can keep that in place, for example. And the other thing is this emotionless. This hasn't got a sense of humor like I have, so or Christian has at the moment. So we have to see how that goes. So, what happens next? Well, what are the top concerns from the executives? These are the top that I have. So we actually did a survey, pulled it out from ChatGPT, and these are the top ones they had. There are 10 here. There were actually more, but I pulled out the top 10 that they had. They're not necessarily in the right order. But the top one, again, is data privacy and security. How secure is your data? Everybody thinks that the cloud is a safe environment. Is it a safe environment?
We don't know.
I,
What are your thoughts on it?
what are my thoughts on it?
Yeah.
It's, I think that's a really good question. There has been a lot of talk and a lot of hype at the moment of things like Huawei and the Chinese infrastructure, and there's been an element of software which has been written on the chip that nobody's been aware of. And you've always got the government making it aware that they have concerns about it. Putting it into the cloud means that you are not accessing, you cannot ring fence your data. So is it safe? It can be, but the challenge is how you're setting it up and how you distribute your data and how you actually control your data could be open to a breach. Right? I haven't been made aware of any breaches at the moment. There have been hacks into systems, and that's through people. But again, you got to be careful. Moving to the cloud, private and public, can be challenging. So personally, I think that there is an element of risk in there. Right?
Okay.
We talked
So,
about
so it, so sorry. Yeah. I just think that this is a really interesting topic of conversation, and
sure.
and I think a lot of people are unaware or don't want to be aware or don't want to pay attention to it. But in terms of data privacy and security, for example, everyone's using ChatGPT, and I'm talking SMBs. What are we looking at? Is there anything in particular that the low hanging fruit that people can do to protect their data, privacy and security for against security breaches by AI? Because I mean, we all know that there's people who try and hack it, but what's AI in terms of how is it going to? Is it because somebody is going to give it an order and say you need to breach this or get information from this place, or how does that how would that be solved or make people made aware of it and saying, okay, well, we need to be careful. This is what we need to do to make it safe.
Okay. So it depends. So that's a kind of like very interesting question, which has got two real answers to it. People who use general chat GPT, so if you go on your computer and you use chat GPT and you load data up, chat GPT will then take your data that it has and will actually start storing it and keeping this data. So you've got to be careful what data you put out there and how you expose it. If you are for example, an insurance organization or a banking organization, and you have personal data, you've got to make sure that you've got to ring fence that data, that you cannot take it out. So you may be using ChatGPT, for example, to do some analysis and to do some design or some reporting, but you've got to be careful that data is then stored locally or in your own cloud environments and not outside, and to make sure that people don't cross pollinate or cross transfer the data from your environment to another one. Now there are safeguards and there's guide rails in place for these, but there are breaches. I have known of, and this one of the stats I've heard recently is that 60% of people are using ChatGPT in the work environment without the knowledge of the organization, which is very scary, right? Because you are now
It
opening
is.
up a data breach, right? Particularly if you,
Absolutely.
yeah, particularly if you're working in the sense of places like the NHS. I'm not saying that they've done it, but the data, some of the banking systems. There was an insurance company recently, where somebody downloaded the data and did some manipulation on ChatGPT, and that data was actually put onto the web. So it's really being smart, keen, and knowing how to ring fence your data that you're not going to make it exposed and be open to the public sector. So, to answer your question, it is a big concern. As long as you build your architecture and you have a secure policy, and what you do with your data is you have a data architecture policy and you have a secure policy and you actually have an AI strategy which actually makes sure that you cover this off in the data privacy and security ring fence so that nobody can do it. What banks tend to do is, for example, put in the USBs, or they can't write anything else, and you have dedicated areas where none of your data can be breached. That's the best way of getting around it. Oh, Simon.
I imagine I'm looking at it from from various perspectives, because it's also understanding how that breach would happen. Um, so, for example, a lot of people will be asking themselves, "Hang on a minute, so AI on its own is going to come and get the data from our platform or from our cloud, or is there always a person who initiates that?" So that's one of the questions that a lot of people may ask. Like, for example, someone who's building a product and wants to use AI. I'm actually that's an actual case that I'm busy with, but we're stuck in that security element where we've got data that we've collected over, geez, a good part of just under a decade, and we store that. Now we want to use AI to then access that data and then give an output to the public. So this is where it gets complicated. How do we ensure that there isn't any data that's sent out by mistake, etc.? And on top of that, it's an internal tool, but there are still limitations in understanding how that AI is going to behave. Is it going to start doing its own thing without us even having any input or impact, or any, I guess, yeah, any interaction, and then it starts doing its own thing?
Yes. So Simon raises a good point here, right? Actually, educating and engaging the people early, and actually one of them is showing how the risks of actually exposing this data to the public is a big thing. You can
Yeah.
actually then buy something like, for example, a Chat GPT, which is for your business, and you can lock it down so they can only look at your data and they cannot get anything outside. So it has a secure firewall wrapped around it, which then stops it going outside of your circle. Now, that costs money, obviously, to do.
Yeah.
But you need to do that because you see some of the IP that you have is highly critical, and it's 8 years or 10. How many years of data did you say it was?
Just over 9 years, between 9 and 10 years.
10 years of data, which your competitors, if it goes in the wrong hands, could utilize it.
Let's.
So you just need to make sure that if you're using it in the cloud, you ring fence that data and you use ChatGPT, or you use a AI tool or a Gen AI tool, depending on what you want it to do, because there's a difference here. You need to make sure that's secure and it only looks at your environment and it only pulls in data which is pertinent to you. But again, I'll go back to the thing of education, education, education. I would say 80% of the breaches that happen are down to people giving you the wrong information, or doing it. Did you hear about the attack, for example, where it all depends on the data, the PI, yeah, and the quality of the data. Yep, very true. There was an incident in
Good
Hong
point,
Kong.
Robert.
Yeah, there was an incident in Hong Kong where there was a somebody was in a meeting and they simulated that they did what's it called, they simulated his boss, and he signed up for $25 million because they did a simulation of his boss in a meeting, and they had an avatar, and they all approved it for him, and he thought he was talking to genuine people. That's a data privacy breach and a security breach, right? And he didn't even know. He thought this was a genuine thing, and he actually approved the $25 million, and they lost that money, right? But the Robin
Well,
also makes a really good point here. It depends on the PII. Yep, I've already got the basic cover. Good point there. Thank you.
and this is where this is the problem. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. Is everyone is rushing into AI with absolutely no fundamental knowledge of, okay, it's great, but we need to be careful and we need to structure security. So I mean, even if you remove the AI component, majority of people have got no clue on really protecting their data. They just think, oh well, internet is a lovely place. We can communicate. It's fast. We got emails, and forgetting the fundamentals that not everyone has got the greatest and good intentions with what you're doing online. So
Correct.
that's something
Correct.
that is worrying, and it's only being, I guess, amplified with AI. So now, how
Correct.
do we keep up, and how do we go back to the basics and the fundamentals to set these security to
Protocols.
deal with these security issues? Because if it wasn't done pre-AI, which is, I guess, I would honestly say there's about a good 90% who have got you know no clue and have got no real in-depth thought or knowledge on their security, on their privacy. And so now we've got AI. Geez, that like that the multiplying factor and risks related to that are just like mind-boggling,
Correct.
and
Correct.
that's concerning.
It is, and that's why you need to have a very good data strategy, which actually encompasses and embraces the security aspects of it as well. Right? You cannot afford to lose that data. 9 years or 10 years of data is key for you, for example. What about some of
Oh,
these guys who've
absolutely.
got 20, 30 years of data? For example, the GSK have to keep their data for 21 years. A
Mhm.
huge amounts of data, huge amounts of challenges they have, and this, so it's got to be right from the beginning set up correctly, and that's the important thing. Reach out to me and I'll be happy to help you on the data privacy side.
Mm.
Okay,
I think that's very good. Okay, thanks. Moving
good.
on. Sorry, Pierre.
No, 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 that's absolutely fine. I hope you ask some more questions again, so you can see very, very much, very quickly, where we have issues around these. If you look at the ones, and again, it's the number 8 and number 7 are the big ones, because primarily you find that the data quality is not always there.
Mm.
Everybody at the C-suite level believes they have strong quality data, and when you actually go back to the heads of the departments, they say that the data is still not there. So there's a lot of challenges, a lot of issues you need to have. They've also got to sift through the element of unstructured data or data, which is fragmented, and you've got to sit and collate it, put it all together, and put it into data lake, and then start using it in AI. So there's something you can do that. These are the ones you can do, but you can break these, as it says in the slide here, into 6 areas. I ideally thought it was 5, but again, I got it wrong, and it's been explained. And the top thing here is really, really important, and something I was actually talking to Simon about earlier on today, is this explaining what AI can do. It's taking your people on the journey, right? You need to make sure that they are part of the solution, right?
Yeah.
These are the ones where everything tends to fail, because one of these alone will make that project fail. And I was talking to a guy called Christian. I think his wife's actually on this call. I'm hoping she's on this call at the moment. Where he talked about some very big, huge programs which have failed. And I think it's down to the 6 areas of focus we have here going forward.
Okay.
Any other questions
Good.
on this?
So my question is going to be obviously related to pricing, and how many people does that exclude? Because obviously, if we're talking about cost of it, you're going to be excluding a huge demographic. Is there anything that can be done, or is anybody doing anything about making it accessible? Because it really needs to be accessible, because with everyone using it and without really a fundamental basic understanding, we're going to run into big problems. So how do we deal with an SMB who is using AI, but there's not all the fundamentals, there's not the security, etc., that's in place, which costs money. So how do we address this?
It's really by doing. That's an interesting question. I'll try and answer to the best of my knowledge at the moment. So depending on each of the areas. So banking will be different to, say, retail, for example, will be different to pharmaceutical, and each of them will have their own security and protocols in place. Where I think it'd be a difference is if you think you're exposed, it's really good to get an assessment done. So look at your data, look at your security, and actually have a vulnerability test, for example, or a penetration test done, and see where you have areas of gaps in your technology. It's only when you go in and you actually do an initial due diligence and you actually expose these, right? Because that's exactly what, sadly, there you go. Many companies still think that although they have no data strategy, right? Uh, AI is here and will solve it all for them. Yeah, that's very true. It won't, right?
Hmm.
That's very true, Robin. Thank you. And you need to educate the senior leadership team to say it's not just the AI tool that's going to help you for it. You've got to be prepared, and you've got to be prepared. For example, ransomware, right? It's going to happen to anybody at the moment. You are exposed. It's going to happen. You need to make sure that you are prepared for it. If you're not prepared, and as Robin says, if you don't have a data structure or data strategy which actually protects you, you're vulnerable. So, the only way around it is bringing specialists like myself in who can help you build this capability and say, these are where your vulnerabilities are, and you need to fix these first before you continue your journey on AI. Get that right, then I think you continue your journey. What does it cost? It's going to be different from each organization. A tier one organization to a tier two to tier three. Tier three will differ in price.
I guess the testing is a very essential element. So you mentioned that, and I think that probably would be a good starting point, is
Yep.
having something that allows people to test their vulnerability, their security, etc. Which would be, I know in marketing there's plenty of tools where you can actually check, the performance and analyze where your web presence stands in terms of marketing. But in terms of safety and security on around AI, maybe that could be one of the solutions that can help. You know, every business should run one of these tests and then understand where there's a problem and fix that problem.
So, as Robin says, right, AI is not going to solve those problems for you. You need someone to go in and do that testing and check it for you, right? And it's really a element of series of checks that you need: pen testing, vulnerability testing, testing of your code, right? Testing of your website. I've actually seen that. I've been talking to a cybersecurity expert where they actually hacked into an organization through an acquisition they had, where they joined the two websites together, and they actually had a vulnerability they weren't aware of in the company that they procured, and they were hackers were able to go via the website into the back end into this. So it's really understanding what you're doing and exposing those gaps you have in the beginning. That's the big challenge, right?
Mhm. Absolutely.
Good, excellent. Thanks, Robin. So moving on. So, what are the common challenges that we have with implementing AI or Gen AI? These are pretty standard, actually. If you really look across the board, and we've talked about CRM systems, you talked about ERP systems, they're pretty much the same, right? You have lack of clear objectives, you have poor data, you have ethical requirements and regulations that have. The change management aspect is a huge one, right? Can't get that right. Number four, you're never going to get it right. Winning the hearts and minds of the people are absolutely key. And something again, Simon, I'm sure you agree with me 100% there. Really, again, around ignoring the human expertise, overemphasis of technology. There you go. Unfortunately, many will see, yeah, as a silver bullet to fix the problems. Very true. And again, the failure to iterate and learn from the mistakes. This is why I keep saying to you, it's time again to start slowly but surely. Do one process, see how it works, go back, assess it, set up an AI team, for example, build that team, build that capability, roll that out, assess what happens, then go back and then take the next process and the next process, so on and so forth. You're right, Simon. Need to come to understand that they need it and how they can improve on it. Insufficient considerations they have. So thank you for that one as well. And again, what we finding as a common mistake is that a lot of people don't actually follow their processes in many of the organizations. They've always found shortcuts and challenges, and they don't even know what the process looks like. So there's a lot of work to be done in that area as well. Tell me this is different. Tell me this is no different from putting in a CRM, like I said before, an ERP system. It's exactly the same solutions. It's the problems you've had before. This is only 8 of them. There's a lot more out there going forward. Any questions?
Not not at this point in time. We can move on to
Cool.
the
So, what are the
what to
things?
consider.
Yes. So, really important, top of the list, working with your team, building up the awareness of it, assurances that they're key, they're critical, they're part of this, right? You also need to clearly define how it's going to embed into business strategy and your IT strategy as well. Okay, those are the two most important things I have for this year. Two of the many, well, these are all critical, but those are two top ones I think at the moment. Ethical considerations, that's built into it as well. You have to have the bias. Number 4, crap in, crap out. You've heard that saying. It's um, always there. If you have really bad crap or bad data, then it's not going to work for you, right?
Mm.
Number 5 is an interesting one. As AI is a new shiny tool, um, are the skills available, right? You need data scientists. You need people to understand your processes. You need to understand people who can do it. You need to build that skill set. You need to build that capability. You can't go and buy it off the shelf. So what's the best
Mm.
thing to do? You have to train your people up, right? You have to select the right tool. Okay,
So,
Microsoft
so
Copilot
this is
isn't the only one
sorry,
yet.
Pierre.
Yeah, go on.
This is where a lot of the problems start. Is on point number 5. Build or acquire AI skills and talent. The thing is, because it was a hype, um, and everyone was talking about it and rushed in like a Black Friday. We've got people then saying, jumping on that bandwagon. I know so many marketing agencies who are saying, we're AI experts. You can sell AI just like that, and let's go. Let's make money. Let's coin it. And then the fundamentals are overlooked. These guys were saying, "Hey, we've got AI, we're experts." I actually have got no clue, and then
Yes,
that's a problem.
yes.
So, is there a way to, you know, provide, maybe, I don't know, if there's a course or courses or different, places where we can find genuine, real knowledge, and have a watertight knowledge base, that people have to go through to be able to then say, hey, like, I know what I'm talking. I can help with AI, implementing it, whatever it is, security, you name it, we can deal with it. But is that in place? Is it being put into place? And if it isn't, how long till we get it? Because the fire is burning hot.
You've asked me many questions there, and I'll try and answer as many as I can. So, what
Yeah.
a lot of people,
Sorry.
what a lot of universities are recognizing, if I can start at the top there, is that there is a gap in this knowledge, and they're starting to get up to speed, and they are offering AI courses, right? But they are getting people who've learned from others what AI is about, and then actually produce some of the courses. So I wouldn't say some of those people are experts, but I mean, people. I for example, lean on Robin. Robin, who's on this call at the moment, has actually written a couple of posts. I lean on Robin a heck of a lot, who knows quite a lot about AI. I love to call him a guru, but he denies that. And I pick people's brains and ideas, but that's because I'm a curious person. But like I said, the universities are picking it up, and they actually are offering courses. Other companies are picking up as well and learning it, and they offer courses in development, in security, in understanding LLMs, and getting the speed. But it's still, there's a gap in the market. That's going to take time. It's not something which is overnight. The hype, like I said, has been going for a couple of years, and some people have got that experience, but there's still a distinct shortage. And the only way you can plug that gap at the moment is having people who can train people in your organization up to retain their skills, right? But then you have another potential threat, because once you've trained those people up, you then don't have, those people may move elsewhere because those people are in huge demand. So because they get a bigger salary. So it's a bit of a challenge that you have to deal with, right? So it's a hard one, but you have to do it, and you have to keep training the people. They have to be made aware. People are the key element of all that's happening inside the AI. So it's a bit of a good answer, but I couldn't answer all your questions, but I hope I answered enough to satisfy you.
You did. Yep.
All right.
All good.
It's also number 6, selecting the right tool. Right. If you looked at it, I said before, 60,000 people writing LLM, 60,000 people doing AI. It's a lot of people out there. You got to have the right tool, right? It's understanding what each and every one of them you can do. What happens is LLMs, you can go out and buy an LLM, which is or an SLM. You have a small language model, but which is standard, or you can have the open source ones as well. But then again, you still need to do some developmental work around it and some tweaks that you need to do. Those people are going to be in short supply very, very shortly. There's lots of Python developers at the moment, but there's not a lot of people who certainly not like writing thing or work around the LLMs. So that's an interesting one as well. Okay, develop and test your AI models, continuously getting it right, checking it, validating it, testing and retesting again. And then once that's done, we need to go back and change the business to align with what you've done inside the AI side. And again, this is where you need change managers who have expertise, who can help build that capability, because you are now effectively changing your business model. You're changing your business organization going forward. And that's another cost factor which you need to build into this, which I don't think a lot of CIOs or CEOs do consider. Right? It's a target operating model redesign to a certain extent. And then, of course, once you've done that, then you need to monitor, evaluate, make changes, and then scale. And once you've actually done one and it's worked out really well, your team are behind you 100%, then you start getting it, building it. You can move it out to HR, finance, all the other areas, supply chain, so on and so forth. So these are the key ones you need to do. Any questions you have at the moment? Great. Okay. Can you touch briefly on creating LLMs from your own data so that the AI understands your environment? James, that's in the next. Thank you, James, for the question. Not in the slide deck. Unfortunately, I'm running out of time. I got 13 minutes on this question. And this, there is going to be another slide deck. So if you do want input into this, I'd be happy to do that in the next presentation I do. So, but that's something I will definitely keep in mind. Sorry, yeah. Okay, so Christian, sorry, can you pull that question back up again? Can you touch briefly on creating? Okay, so the AI understands your environment. Good question again, Robin. Is that something you can help answer for me, please? Type away and respond back to that. I'm sure he is. Hopefully, if not, I'll come back to that question a little bit later, if that's okay, James. Okay. There's 8, in my view, there's 8 ethical considerations for AI. It's really around fairness and bias. It talks about transparency and explainability. It talks about privacy and protection, making sure you don't expose yourself. Accountability and responsibility, security and risks, the social impacts, responsibilities, and of course the continuous monitoring that you have. These are just 8 of the key ones I believe you need to have. There are a lot more, but get this right, and I think this is going to help you go forward a long way. So people, I believe, are your biggest challenge here, right? And there is always an element of concern, stress, and if you look at this here, there's always an element of mistrust. There's always a fear of change. They fear that it's going to interrupt their jobs. They're going to have a concern about it. They do think they're going to lose jobs, and albeit there are going to be some, like I said before, some job losses. I don't think you're going to see that much as well. There will always be culture blockers, and I think I coined a very interesting phrase I heard yesterday is, those people that embrace AI will go forward. Those people that don't embrace AI will fail. And that's a very interesting analogy, because we all go through the changes where we all know that there's concerns of handing over control to a machine, albeit that it's been trained up and it's the data you have. Talks about lack of owner sponsorship. We constantly find that the executives want to do these changes, but it costs money, and sometimes always can't find the money. So there's always a constraint you have there. Talent scarcity, we've talked about this before. Training your people up and making sure you can retain that skill set to work with and to implement it going forward, and then building the capability. On the screen, on the right hand side of the screen, you'll see that what actually happens is that you have the initial shock, and you've seen this with a lot of the hype at the moment. Then there's an element of denial. You get really frustrated because you can't learn it, and this is where Robin comes into, because he does some really good training courses. You then get to a very, very poor stage where you start thinking, I just can't do it. I'm a failure. I'm really, really. Oh, and of course the use case and how it is. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Robin. And then, of course, moving on to, and of course, the use cases and how they use, right. And then experiment with it. And when they start experimenting and they start seeing, actually, I can use this and I can work with this, then they start getting a positive. And then you see the positive decisions going forward. And then you'll start seeing the integration into the business. And that's the key thing. And this is, again, the same type of curve that you see in any other tool you put in, CRM systems, ERP systems, so on and so forth. Okay, any other? Thank you, Robin, for that point. So, every organization is going to be different, but this is a general framework of what or a reference architecture of what an AI model will look like. You'll have your data coming in from below. You'll have your feature stores, you have your training data, you have your validation data. You'll take it to model development, you'll look at it, and then you start looking at deploying and then monitoring. And then on top of that, you'll have your workflows, and then you'll have your factor engagement. So this is the typical high-level overview of what an architecture looks like. Okay, then, this is a bit of an interesting slide, I think. So the environmental, social, and governance impacts. What does this mean to us, right? So if we look at it, there's three parts: water, electricity, and the carbon, right? Top one is very, very interesting. For every 20 to 50 transactions, which are actually done in ChatGPT, it uses 500 milliliters of water. Do you remember, Christian, I asked you before, how many transactions, what was that number you remembered from before?
I think it was 24 billion.
So if this is 200 to 20 to 50 transactions, right, and it uses 500 milliliters, by quick maths, there's 24 billion transactions. How much water do they use to cool the systems? Apart from
Vast
a lot.
amount.
Okay. By 2027, up to, and this, by the way, is the only slide which I can't validate and substantiate. This is what information I've been given. There's some speculation about it. It's because of some in the future, right? So if you look at it, 6.6 billion cubic meters of water by 2027. A lot of water.
So can it be seawater? I'm guessing that's the way to go about it.
Seawater is corrosive because it's got salt in it.
Oh well, then we've got a problem.
Well, yes, I think we do need to do this. And one of the questions I'll be asking the government is, what are you doing to build on those extra water, the storage, the electricity you have? For example, then we'll move on to the next one there, right? Look at the middle one where training the LLMs is going to use 1,300 megawatts, right? It uses of 130 houses. But by the end of the decade, it's going to go from 4% to 25%. Where are we going to get electricity from? In South Africa, you got load shedding. I don't know where they're going to get it from, but that's also going to be very interesting.
There's load shedding in the US as well. I mean, there's an energy problem, and so how are we going to deal with it? Because we're adding strain on the grid generally globally. We're just adding onto it, and the infrastructure is not following the pace at which we're adding a strain on the infrastructure. So maybe one of the things that we need to do and that will help slow it all down is, hang on a minute, let's have a look at the infrastructure, because the infrastructure needs to be able to cope with the change.
Look at the carbon footprint of actually training GPT-3. 552 tons of CO2.
Crazy. Crazy.
Okay. I just thought I'd put a little bit of a shock tactic in there as well, just to show you guys. But it is a, it's a huge problem. And I mean, it's just going to get the demand for electricity. And by the way, the best and most effective way, I suppose, are your wind farms. And it takes a long, long time in the UK to actually get a wind farm up. I think it takes 2 to 3 years to get one of those turbo fan thingies going. And it takes 30 years to commission a nuclear power plant. And, you know, the cheapest and best options are from the Chinese, who will build them for us. I don't know. I think we're going to have a big problem going forward.
James, good point from James. Microsoft will completely missed their 2030 and 2050 net zero targets entirely due to their AI investment. That's crazy.
I think, if I remember correctly, James, that's a good point. I think haven't they scrapped their 2030 and 2050 targets? I'm sure I read somewhere. Maybe I'm wrong, because I realize you're absolutely correct. They will not hit that, right? So
So there's an infrastructure problem that we all need to deal with before we carry on, because
correct.
otherwise it's going to be a nightmare.
Good guys. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to crack on. Right. This is the best part for me. Right. The ethical uses of AI. So I don't know what's ethical usage of the AI governance side. This is the European-based risk-based approach defined by Europe, right? And it is a risk-based approach, but the UK produce their own, right, which is a principle-based one. So you got the two different papers. So what happens if we are here in the UK and we are, and your business works in Europe? Do you use the UK-based one? Do you use the European one? If you got a European-based organization, do you have to use the UK one? Bit of a challenge and a bit of an interesting point at the moment. Okay, here's a comparison of the two. I didn't actually do it. Somebody, Robin, actually did this for me. This was really good, but it shows you the differences between the two. And I personally think there's a lot of work that needs to be done about this. They have a minister for AI who's actually apparently working on this, and I don't know how long it's taken to get this forward. But you can see the comparisons of the two and how we need to do it. I do think that Europe does need to have a single standard. Where you looked at GDPR, what actually happened with GDPR, for example, is that the European Union released that, and now other companies or other countries are following that and have something very similar based on that. And I think we should go for the European Act. But this is a very, very high level approach and something we need to consider. So, and finally, and that gives us a few minutes just to answer a couple of questions, the unethical approach to Dilbert using ChatGPT.
I've seen this. I think you showed me. I think this nails it.
So that gives it 4 minutes for any questions.
Perfect.
That's it, guys. So James's previous response about more knowledge about the data. James, it will take me more than 4 minutes to actually do it. Can I ask a favor? Can you send me a LinkedIn request or send me the details? And I'd like to try and answer that question for you after this call, if that's okay.
Perfect. I'm gonna ask Annabelle if she can drop your LinkedIn handle or your X handle into the chat so that everyone can access it. That would be great. Um, we don't have a hard stop if you've got 2-3 minutes.
Yeah,
Happy
I'm fine.
to to answer. There's no hard stop, so we can carry on a little bit.
Great. So, with that being the last slide, are there any questions that you guys have in this? There's my contact details, by the way, my email address. And if Annabelle, you could do me a favor, please, and put my LinkedIn and my Twitter address as well in there. I'd appreciate that. Any questions, anybody?
Um, I don't have any questions apart from, this infrastructure thing. I guess it may be the way to slow it down because, I mean, we need to figure out, it's a chicken and egg situation. What do we deal with first? What's the low hanging fruit? And I think with everything that's going on, I mean, there's more and more pockets in South Africa, but you guys are used to it. Zim is the same, in plenty of African countries, but we're actually seeing that more and more in Europe, where there are more and more power cuts. they're not as frequent. The US has the same. So the idea with the infrastructure needs to be done about the infrastructure, which would be a good starting point. Um, eh, but do you know if anything is being done or discussed in the higher realms or the within the authorities and different intergovernmental bodies?
So here in the UK, I do know that we were dependent, quite heavily dependent on a lot of electricity, yeah, electricity and gas coming from Europe. We did have lines going as far as Europe, Ukraine, but as you know, there's a challenge in Ukraine at the moment. What we are doing is we're getting about, I think it's about 40% of electricity, and don't hold me against those numbers, was coming from France because they had a surplus, so they could do that. Then we could do some power sharing. But I think that the governments do need to put into place something which will look at something in the short term, medium term, and longer term, right? So maybe put up some more wind farms, which will help them. The challenge, like I said before, normally takes 2 to 3 years, or maybe even longer, before you can even get planning permission to put one of these farms up. So that process needs to be changed, I think, very, very quickly. So I think there are some short term answers. But we need a and we, as you know, we going through elections very shortly. I think in fact it is the 4th of July, so that's where I think it will happen. And Labour have made a commitment that they're going to put more wind farms up, so that may be a short-term answer to what we need to do. So yes, we may be able to ship electricity. I mean, if more and more people are going towards putting what you call it, solar panels up on your roofs, that could help as well. I was speaking to somebody yesterday who has he spends no money on because he has solar panels in the UK. He said, and in London where it rains a lot. He says it's cost neutral. Maybe the way to go forward.
Okay, right.
Maybe
Well,
worth our
really
while.
interesting.
Oh, James, you compared UK and European AI policies. Have you experienced the Middle East? No, I haven't, James. I only know those two at the moment. Robin, is that maybe a question you could answer? I only know European and UK at the moment. Don't know if in the Middle East have experienced uh, anything. Interesting enough to say that the privacy laws and the data storage is very strict. It's the same rules and regulations here in the UK. We are not allowed to move our data, particularly in the banking and insurance sector, out of the country. So I think that it's a similar rules, James, as what we have here. So I don't know. I'll be guessing. I don't know that one, so I'd have to look at that very quickly. But that's a very interesting point. Yeah, that's a good point, James. I'd love to come back to you and have a conversation with you if you don't mind, and pick it up.
Yeah. Uh, uh, Great comment. The last one. Was gonna put it up here. Fantastic.
Excellent.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, Robin, thanks for all your input and question, and from everybody else as well. But I think, from my gathering is you guys have got quite a bit of knowledge, and understand where the issues are, and probably have, if not all the solutions, a lot of the solutions that can be implemented, or at least provide the information to help, especially the smaller businesses. I mean, I'm focused on the smaller businesses because I'm not worried. The big guys have got the finances and the money to be able to sort themselves out. But I'm really worried about the small businesses, the mom and pop shops, um, uh, your um, uh, boring businesses and things like that, who want to use AI to make things easier, your solopreneurs, etc. So it'd be amazing to maybe see how we could put something together where that information and you as individuals with vast knowledge on the topic are made accessible, or I don't know. So I think that's something that could be discussed post um, post masterclass, and yeah, definitely exchange these your contact details, and see if we can collectively get the word out there where people need to wake up and smell coffee, I guess.
This is one of three slide decks which I'm actually have. This is a high level C-suite deck that I'm actually presenting here at the moment. What I've done as well is, well, okay, that's what you need to do. What are the next steps? What is it you need to be doing? What is the, if you are going to go ahead with AI, what are the considerations? Where do you need to look at it? What do you want to do? And then the third step is, well, okay, have you thought about, now that you've talked about it at a high level, you've now got it's a next set of deck that talks about, what are the things you need to do, and it's not as comprehensive as this, but there's still a lot of information. And then the third deck is, well, okay, now that you actually know roughly what you want to do and what you need to do, the steps are, what is the people that you need to do this? So there's three parts of this. So I'll be happy to come back and present again in a few weeks, not to give somebody else a chance, but I'd be happy to come back and start presenting those as well, if you need be, so that people can start getting into it, and we can start answering those more detailed questions around the data side. What is it you need to consider? What do you need to build? Do you need to build, for example, a data lake? Right? Where do you need to? How do you extrapolate the information from your systems? If you have, for example, a bank that I know here in the UK who has 3,000 different applications and about 15 to 20,000 databases, how do you extract that information from there? How do you take the data and then sift through it to make sure that's relevant and pertinent for you, that is accurate, to build your LLM? That's where your question lies into it. And then, how do you go through the factors of, am I P. Montersino, am I Montersino Pierre, am I Pierre Louis Montersino? If you see three records for me, how do you consolidate that? Do you, and who validates it, who checks that? And that's where, building maybe potentially a data lake and understanding what the data looks like will help you build your LLM. So, there's an element of precursor, and, you need your subject matter experts, your people are your heads up, the people who actually understand the data to be working with you to define that, right? It's a complex thing. Data is key, right? But it goes back to the same thing again. You need your people to do that. How many people have been, because of the cost challenges and the implications of COVID, and there's people who've been let go from the businesses who have retained that knowledge and walked away with that knowledge, right? And you've got to go back and reverse engineer and capture that data. If you've lost that technology, that skill set, that capability, what do you do? And
Mm.
it's easy for for somebody like you said, a tier 2 or tier 3, where they're small organizations and they can contain the data on, say, a single file server,
Single
in
half.
back.
Exactly.
But if you like a
But
banking
still.
organization, you got millions and millions of records. How do you deal with that?
Mm. Okay. Well, that's the question that you're leaving all of us with, and I think that's a good way to wrap.
Good. And
Fantastic.
again, please touch base with me, link in with me. My handle, I haven't
And
put
on X.
my DS all available, and I look forward to seeing you all next time.
To
And thank you for your time.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Pierre, for your time and going and presenting this to us and the audience. Thanks everybody who joined on X, etc. It's been a pleasure. Anil, Robin, Simon, James, and everybody else. I know Ryan has been on and off because he's a busy man, but yeah, and I guess that's a wrap. Thank you very much, Pierre. Have an awesome evening, and until the next time.
I'll go and play my piano now in the background. Thank you.
Cheers, Pierre.
Bye, guys.